we are going to be talking about Test Suite. Our partners at UiPath have joined us, and we're going to be talking about a new way to QA, which is testing as a service. So not only are we going to be talking about the features and functionality a little bit in what the Test Suite platform has to do, but really about the business value and the automation gains that are received and realized when applied properly. So today's the day where you ask all the questions. No question is too silly. We have several questions that you guys asked at the beginning during registration. And what was particularly interesting about the aggregation of folks attending today is there was about 55 people who registered, and there was every single walk of life. We had everything from process improvement specialists, COE leaders, automation enthusiasts, data scientists, and test specialists. So it was kind of a wide gamut, which is just a really interesting demographic as we get into this discussion. So people will begin to trickle in. We're going to start off with a quick state of the nation, so you guys see kind of what's going on, what the analysts are saying, and what we're talking about. And then we'll be inviting our friends here from UiPath and our very own Jobin for a fireside chat discussion. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and kick us off with a high-level view of what the state of automation is today. All right, so this is what we'll be talking about today. Again, questions can come throughout the course of this presentation. And once we get to the meat and potatoes of this discussion, which is really our experts answering some of these questions, you guys are certainly welcome to interact via those two features. So wanted to first start off, I always love level setting with the conversations that we're having in the field, not only with our clients, but with other folks that are trying to think through what's next, not only in the age of AI, but as we're looking to shift some of the budget that's been traditionally placed in RPA or automation or process improvement, there's often a disconnect between what's required to actually make those processes efficient and executable the first time. Being error prone is something that nobody has time or bandwidth for in this age of automation. We're moving too quickly. If you look at some of the stats that we got from Gartner and from IDC over the course of the last month in preparation for today, it's really interesting to see that extra emphasis on quality, on the infrastructure, and troubleshooting, saving time is big. Total cost of ownership is something that leadership is finally looking at, because it's no longer a project by project basis to add implementations of automation to your organization. So it can't just be a project at a time. It can't just be, finance raised their hand and said, we need a report generated faster. There needs to be execution across the board and enterprise wide. And there's little increments of value that can be received and gained when testing is applied properly. If you also take a look at the entire SDLC process, and as software is just inundating the marketplace, it's more important than ever to be able to organize and orchestrate the way that testing is done across the enterprise. If there's applications being used by multiple business units, who's responsible for that governance? Who's responsible for making sure that the budget behind that is adhered to? And who's responsible for the outcomes being generated in a timely and swift manner to ensure that there's no operational downtime when things go into production? It's crucial. Not only that, but we also have the challenge of different expansions happening in organizations. So there's migrations taking place. There's all kinds of transformations going on. A lot of our clients are on that SAP S/4HANA move. And as you do that, and as you think through what's next, it's crucial to understand that the different items of testing are going to be foundational in having a new state that's tested properly and executed well. Some of the obstacles that we see in traditional testing, which is why this business unit emerged in the first place. Of course, maintenance, do we have the right people, the right testers? It's not the same talent that's required for testing across the board. Do we have the right talent at the right time to continue to check and recheck and ensure things are done well? Well, guess what? If you automate testing, you don't have to worry about that as much. There's complexity, right? So different technologies, especially now in the age of AI, when we've only been playing with certain types of technologies for about 3, 4, 5 months, how are we to know what exactly testing accurately looks like, right? So there's a lot of charting unknown waters when it comes to emerging technology, which can add to the complexity and therefore complication and cost of testing within an organization. The other thing that we come across often is that testers don't have enough time to test everything with each change, right? And so they're responsible for not only anticipating what moves IT is making, maybe collaborating with IT, but understanding what the scope of their project is supposed to actually achieve, right? And so really working lockstep with a technology that can put it forward takes away the manual obstacles that come from that scope and ability to see everything that it is that they need to do. Testing teams face a shortage also, right? So not only is it about the testing itself, but if there's something that needs to be modified, changed, developers are hard to come by now, especially with hard coding. In automation, we have a special breed of developers that have emerged as a result of this space. But even still, when it comes to comprehensive testing, there's really been a shortage in the resources and the lack of diversity in being able to apply that skill set across multiple applications. And lastly, tooling, right, which is what we're here to talk about today. It's more important than ever if we're going to be launching softwares at scale throughout an organization. If AI is going to be infused into the fabric of our operations, then how can we not modernize our tooling? How then are we going to trust what we're putting out into production with our client data, our employee data, our revenue information? How is it that we're going to trust that with not equally matching the modernization effort that testing allows us to have? So testing as a service emerged as a result of several of these scaling challenges that we were seeing in the marketplace. 70% of projects fall short of meeting their targets. I'm sure you've heard that before, right? Definitely not on time and definitely not under budget. Well, testing is something that traditionally has helped with that. But again, it's hard to massage the quality of what something is going to be operationalized into if you don't know what technology you're using to begin with, right? And if we don't use technology to match technology checking, then we're probably a little bit further behind. If you look at poor quality software reaching a $1.6 trillion number, right? The failures, that's an excruciating amount of budget that can be reallocated, repositioned, and not tossed, right? So again, it's about total cost of ownership when thinking through the test tooling that your organization should procure. What does testing as a service cover, and what is that, right? So at WonderBotz, we have simplified the way that we apply technology to organizations. That's been the bread and butter of our organization since inception. We started with RPA, OCR, IDP, all the different acronyms you can come up with. Testing finally doesn't have one. So I hope, guys, today we don't come up with a new acronym for this as well. That's my goal. But what we've been able to do is we've seen that over time, because of some of those obstacles in scaling software deployments at scale, we've really been able to see that testing is going to come in very handy in a managed service model. Why? Because every time that you implore to have a new technology, be it AI, that's the new buzzword of the day, suddenly you need a data engineer. Suddenly you need all types of resources that you didn't have before. But by procuring this as a service, it takes the risk off the organization and still gives you the value to operationalize using Test Suite. So functional testing, security testing, regression testing, there's all different formats and areas in which Test Suite can be applied. What's beautiful about our partnership with UiPath in this case is that we've given, again, the reins back to the client to go back to creating valuable automations, thinking through what it is that they need to do with mandates like SAP to S/4HANA, migrations and exercises that the IT department is doing that are critical, that must be done, but allowing this additional lever that adds time and value to the operation model. This is going to be a game changer, right? So even when it's trying to figure out, does AI work for us? There's a risk-free, a reduced risk approach to testing to see if something works for your organization. So the way this works is we identify the testing needs, right? So we take a look at some of the service planning and designing. The team works together with your organization to find out what it is that you need. Now, some clients are very hands-on, some don't want to have anything to do with it, right? And both models work. The crux of the testing model that we've proposed here and that our friends here are going to talk about is it really gives us the opportunity to execute at scale and multiple times with each tweak, right? Not missing something just because, oh, that's mostly how that application runs, right? It allows us to be able to work behind the scenes around the clock and ensure that testing is done on each process that's being launched by the organization. The feedback and reporting is in a very seamless, easy to open and extract kind of format so that decisions can be made very quickly on what needs to be automated, what needs to be optimized, what things could potentially go away as a result of testing, and seeing what applications that the organization is really using. It wouldn't be a true WonderBotz webinar if we didn't talk about what the difference is in value, right? And so looking at the value, this was something that our friends at Gartner helped us to put together, of looking at the manual versus automated, right? And so there's a lot of different methodologies for how testing works in automation and in application testing. What we've learned and what we've seen is that the analysts are pushing for tooling to match the age of AI. And as you've probably seen some of the terminology that's come out as of late with Gartner. They've just called it BOAT, right? So we fall into a new category. And with that orchestration layer, testing becomes foundational. Because for us to be able to orchestrate across multiple applications and testing every single type of process that goes into an organization, it's crucial for us to have that orchestration layer also tested at equal scale. So this gives us the opportunity to find value within the organization already pumping out new software and having innovation. The thing that stifles innovation the most is risk aversion. And with testing, you can put your mind at ease to make sure that you are still staying on the pulse of the market, still innovating at scale, keeping up with your competitors, keeping your clients happy, but still doing it at a cost-effective approach and a partner and a service provider that can really get it done. So some benefits of software testing as a service, right? And we'll be sending this to everybody as well. We got some feedback on the last few webinars that everybody kind of wanted to see what the documentation was that we had. And so some of these benefits of testing as a service really make for the ability for you to go back to your core competency, and if that's, creating automations, or if that's running an IT department, then that's what that entails, right? And let the experts, that are going to join just in one moment here, be the ones that really help you understand what your test scope is, what it is that you need. If there's a way to infuse test robots, that's another advent of the kind of evolution of how automation has gone over the last 5 to 7 years, and really come to a place where you say, is this something that we need all hands on deck? Is it that every time we launch a new software, we're going to have an outsourced testing group? And the answer is no. You can have it internal as well, right? With some of these, these ways of going about testing as a service without having to have the core competency in-house. The other addition that is advantageous here is understanding that you don't have to do this multiple times. So one of the reasons that WonderBotz partners so closely with UiPath is that we've always had a reusability framework. And with that reusability framework, it's been key for us to do things one time, right? And so when we take a peek at if something works, we build it, we use it, and guess what? Sometimes, for those of you who understand the concept of objects, right, you're able to take some of that code that you've repurposed, tested, and put to use, and guess what? Use it again, right? So if one organization, one line of business is using a piece of an extraction from SAP, you test that application for efficacy. Well, the next line of business that needs to extract something from SAP already has a head start. And by testing and consolidating that way, you're able to put those components to good use, further realizing value in how the test suite works. All right, gentlemen, so we'll go ahead and start while this first poll is being launched here, and have you guys introduce yourselves. So I'll start with our guests. Mike, why don't you kick us off with an intro? Great to see you here.
Hi, I'm Mike Buttram. I'm based in Atlanta, and I'm a test suite sales specialist for UiPath. So I work with all of our account executives whenever the conversation turns to testing automation, outside of the core automation and AI technologies that UiPath offers. Brian?
And Paula, thank you so much for having us. My name is Brian Foster. For those that are on the call, I am one of the principal sales engineers here at UiPath. So I'm the technical liaison for Mike. I am the one that is usually in the field with him doing all of the demos and POCs. So Mike basically gets to go sell it and I have to go prove it. So that's how I love to talk about it.
Fantastic. And then our very own from WonderBotz, he's the one that has to implement it. So Jobin, introduce yourself.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for joining today. Myself, Jobin. I'm working as a senior consultant with WonderBotz. So outside core RPA, I'm especially focusing on the test suite, just exploring the ways how the product is really simplifying the testing process. So that's a very quick intro about myself.
Thank you so much. So these gentlemen provide a wide array of understanding of not only this product, but this industry. And so I think it's really important, especially for the wide diversity of demographics that we have here, to kind of start with sort of the history. So how testing has evolved as it relates to automation. So Mike, I'm going to turn it to you. You've done testing long before, you came to UiPath. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective a little bit about, who are the players that are involved in software as it's, kind of developed and come along. When is testing applied? When do organizations kind of have that aha moment that we need this? So give us a little bit of framework of how that originated and kind of why we're so excited to be here at this modern step of Test Suite with you guys.
Sure, thank you. It was my gray hair that gave me away, right? So I've been in the testing space from back in the Mercury Interactive days with LoadRunner, WindRunner, more recently with companies like Tricentis. But this really got its start back in the 50s when the software development process was a 12 to 18 month initiative. And the testing process was its own phase. You built something and then everyone went and tested it for a month or more. So that had its limitations. It was called waterfall. And as the testing teams have accelerated their work and made it part of the overall development process, they've moved to agile technologies. So we now, almost all of our customers are on a 2-week sprint where they're developing the functionality and testing it. At the same time, they're doing regression testing to make sure they didn't break anything with the development of the previous day. Most of our customers are running a regression suite every night, so they know exactly what happened the previous day. And we're seeing more integration to that software development life cycle and the DevOps tools that are involved there, so that it's an automated process, so that every time a new piece of code gets committed, it gets tested. It gets tested with integration. It gets tested with end-to-end, so that you know exactly where you are. Anything you would add, Brian?
I think the only thing that I would say is that there's a myriad of tools out there, Paula, as you can imagine. Mike mentioned a couple. There's open source. And what we're seeing with a lot of the evolution and the history of testing today is that I just feel like there's this huge shift that's happening from a technology standpoint. And I think Jobin would probably agree with me here, simply because in the past, all testing was done from a technical perspective. Most testing teams were part of an IT group because you had to know how to write C# or Python or Java or something. And now with the advent of AI plus these low-code, no-code options that we have available, especially here at UiPath, it's really allowing us to be able to move those testing capabilities into either testing COE organizations or lines of business. So from a historical standpoint, I kind of feel like we're at a huge tipping point right now in regards to how things are going to be done. I think that testing is really going to start moving out of the IT groups and moving more into the application teams, the lines of business, the subject matter experts, because you don't have to be a technical resource anymore to be able to create these testing automations. It really is meant to be ease of use, point, click, drag, drop kind of stuff.
I think the diversity of who's shown up to this webinar speaks to what you just said, Brian, right? Because everybody's kind of clamoring for, wait, that thing that I touch, how do I ensure that that is going to go into production seamlessly, right? And now that I know that I have a low-code option at my desktop, right? And with this rise of agentic AI, I've got things doing things on my desktop. Well, what does that look like? What's the governance there? What am I making sure that I'm plugging into in the organization? And Jobin, I'll kick this one to you, because you're hands-on keyboard, and I saw your face, kind of explode when you said, 18 months of software development. Like, oh, you would have no patience for that. But so modernization in general in the testing organization, right, or just having testing be a part of the organization, said differently, is crucial more than ever, right? And so give us some examples of what you're seeing in the field and how it's applied, from that perspective, the equal match of modernization, both with the applications and software development as with the testing, and why it's important for those to go hand in hand.
Yep, definitely. That's a wonderful question. So the modernization of test operation is so crucial in today's world, especially for the organization. There are a couple of reasons. The very first thing is we all know that it will reduce the manual effort and it will accelerate the go to the market time. So that as an enterprise side, that is the enterprise is always looking for. Let's go with an example. Let's say that you're building a product and as soon as possible, you want to put it on the market and your end user will be really eager to use the product. That's one thing. And second thing will be something subsequent to the point one, which is whenever you are delivering something that should be in a high standard, right? So that's how we can communicate with this environment. So these are the two reasons, and there are a lot of other reasons as well. Let's talk about, Brian was talking about the different types of the testing things, right? Initially, we started with C# of different technologies. Now, if you are going with the modernization, there is something called enhanced test coverage. We are not only focusing on the functional and non-functional test cases. Instead, so I think Paula is already shown it on the screen, right? There are different testing types. Performance testing is there, security testing is there, compatibility testing is there. So ideally, it's covering the entire end-to-end automation. That's what's happening on the modernization.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I think that speaks to, some of our friends at the analyst pools are pulling together different organizations that are talking about testing specifically, because I think there's just so many startups that are rising up with the new software, right? And having that spaghetti code, as we like to call it, kind of go everywhere and not understand how that kind of morphs together in the organization can get pretty complicated. And if you have to have an expert for every single type of software in the organization, it adds up to this resource problem, that becomes really stifling. And again, the opportunity cost there is innovation. And the last thing we want is for our clients and our friends to pause and balk at innovation because they're concerned about what that's going to imply, right? And so this is one of those fail safes that really helps it. So UiPathers, I'll turn to you, Brian. I'll start with you on this one. So how did it happen, right? We've all watched, UiPath kind of grow up, or many of us have anyway. And So as a pure play RPA firm through to a platform of many bells and whistles, several acquisitions and IPO later, how did UiPath decide, and when was that decision made to think through testing as an offering within the organization? Tell us a little bit about that, Advent.
Sure, great question. And Mike, get ready because I'm going to kick it to you. You know more of the historical background on this perspective, but I'm going to talk about it from a technology standpoint. Paula, one of the things that's so cool about the RPA capability within the UiPath platform, and again, this is me talking technically, having been doing this for 30 years in the industry, is the simple fact that we can have one tool that can do so many different platform plays. We can automate in mainframe, Citrix-enabled VMware-based applications, thick client-based applications. I'm working with organizations that are still running in production 20-year-old Java applications that are thick client desktops, and they have a hard time finding tooling to be able to either automate it or create testing against that. In the late 20s, UiPath really saw a market where all of the testing tools that were out there, and you think about Selenium, open source options, UFT, as Mike mentioned, Tricentis, a lot of those tools are fairly old because you start thinking about when they kind of came to the market. There hasn't really been a new entry into the market on the testing front until UiPath kind of came around. And the benefit there that I saw that I love is that we embraced all of modern day technology. So we're using cloud first approaches towards web testing, other initiatives. And more importantly, where we saw this huge gap of these legacy-based tools, we now brought to market something that was new and fresh, and the ability to be able to do things that other tools couldn't do. And Paula, you hit the nail on the head. You were talking about these teams having to use all of these different disparate tools within their organization to do mobile testing or to do this. So they've got this homegrown app and they're having to maintain it and all of these other things. A lot of our organizations today that are migrating over to UiPath Test Suite, the thing that Mike and I hear all the time is that, man, I just want to get rid of all of this technical debt that I have within my organization. And I just want one standard platform that everybody can use. That's kind of why we came together. And so, Mike, I'll kick it to you and you can kind of lay into more of the history and the business stuff.
You kind of nailed it there. But this is the entire reason I'm here. I saw the potential of this when I was at a previous company. The fact that it was a single approach that would leverage everything that UiPath had built for the last 10 years, doing this in production. I mean, we can actually test in production. Most tools don't like to do that. We do it all the time, especially with the governance, risk management, and compliance initiatives. We have the ability to actually, because we're built in production, we're built to run in production. So testing in all the lower environments allows us to leverage all of that. And by starting fresh, unlike any other testing tool, we were able to take advantage of latest technologies, latest architecture. So we're built for the cloud from day one. We can run on-prem, we can run in the cloud, or we can run hybrid. So perfect for driving testing as a service initiatives, perfect for addressing every possible technology in your company with the same approach that doesn't require a ton of coding and scripting, unless you need to.
Well, I think that's key. And one of the things that WonderBotz has been really keen on doing is making sure that our universal orchestrator has been at the forefront of the tool suite that our clients use. And what we've been able to do with ARIA is apply all these different adjacent technologies to come through and be managed, operated, and executed from a single interface. Right. And so it's interesting that we kind of got named as an orchestration, one to watch, orchestration to watch, and then, Boat came out shortly after. And so we've definitely stayed on the pulse because we've been pure play automation folks, right? And pure play automation folks understand that with, the age of AI, with the infusion of all these different adjacent technologies, that there is going to be complexity that's naturally derived from that type of innovation. And we shouldn't stifle it. We should just figure out how to corral it, right? And I think that's what we've been able to do. And having Test Suite kind of infused through the operations, we drink our own Kool-Aid, right? Within WonderBotz for what we build for clients. Our robust managed service practice is really something that we wouldn't ever put into production without having that fail-safe layer. And so it's been really interesting, not only to see how we're absorbing it as a user and as a producer, but we've gotten a lot of learnings to be able to share with our clients on what that looks like too. And it's just been really interesting to see that it's almost like the spunk of something new comes out first, and then it's like, okay, hold on a second, like what do we got to do to kind of think it through? And I think those timelines are kind of marrying now. Since we're in this age of AI, that everybody's a little bit more concerned about technology, enough to take a look at this and enough to see that there is a better way, right, to be able to do this lockstep along the way. So Jobin, this one's for you. So how do you think AI changes the way that organizations are thinking of deploying software, infusing new technologies, and therefore leveraging Test Suite? So tell us a little bit, because you're an AI guru too. Let's not get it twisted, not just Test Suite. So with the advent of AI being so huge here, in the market, what has been the contributing factor to folks really getting on board with understanding the value of test?
Yep, definitely. So Autopilot, you all of aware about this new thing which is there on the entire UiPath ecosystem. So when you look into the UiPath Test Suite product, the product itself saying that we are simplifying the testing process, right? So what you are doing is we are just applying the AI wherever possible. If you take starting from the analyze design phase, then moving to the automation phase, and finally on the analysis phase. In all the phases, we are literally applying AIs with responsibility. So let's say that you want to generate a test case from a description or a document. Yes, Autopilot will be smart enough there to generate the test cases for you. And you're thinking that you want to refine your requirement or test cases. Yes, you have an option for it. So ideally, these kind of things will be literally time saving for the customers. And when it is coming to the automation side, we can generate coded automation through the autopilots. And finally, once it is deployed, there will be some cases, some of the test cases might be failed, right? So we can run an analysis out of the test result, and it will be suggesting you what went wrong, what are the suggestions, and based on that, we can make relevant changes. And of course, if you are already integrated with any of the ALM products in the market, let's say that ServiceNow or Azure DevOps, you can definitely create defects for the failed one so that it will be easily trackable. So that's a one good thing which I observed on the product. If you take other products in the market, the centralized management is comparatively very less, whereas when it is coming to the UiPath test suite, so there will be an in a nutshell, you can see everything in one place.
Yeah, no, that consolidation is definitely such a value add, right? To be able to truly see what the entire production environment is, where snags are happening over time, finding out, is it a person that's managing that development cycle that's maybe not so great, right? Or is it just our framework? You're able to really look and dig into the data of what you've executed as an organization, refine, align, and move forward, right? And so that's the big beauty of this too, is that there is retroactive, kind of reviews that leaders can actually take to understand, okay, what do we need to do differently, right? Are we making the same snag over and over again? Are we, repeat, is it just this application? Does anybody even use this, right? Like, that's a great question to answer. Is anybody even using this? Does anybody care if this fails or not, right? Because maybe we can talk procurement, it's one less vendor we need. So there's a lot of applications in the data that we're able to extract by having this consolidated view. And so, Mike, I'll kick it to you because I think this is an important segue. And a lot of folks are probably trying to figure out, who's in charge of this, right? So you mentioned kind of the, it's typically born, in the IT department, but with this convergence into the business user truly becoming more of a master of their own code, their no code, right? And having a little bit more autonomy on creating, business rules and outcomes, at their desktop, autopilot, a lot of these different, toolings that have come out. Where does the leadership lie when it comes to Test Suite? Who owns it? Who should budget it? Who should operate it? How should they work together and play nice in the sandbox?
Yeah, that's a very good question because we don't see as many monolithic QA teams under an IT department anymore. They are splintered. I'll say they're federating out into the organization where there's much more involvement from different stakeholders. And what's driving that is the shift left movement to test things earlier in the development cycle and shifting right to involving more of the business. We see a lot of interest with citizen developers, with business analysts that want to get into it because that domain expertise is becoming more and more important. You don't need someone that's a scripting guru to go in and write test cases, especially with the advent of generative AI. 60 to 70% of that gets done easily. And then a domain expert is probably better to guide that final development of a test case than even someone with those, that skill set per se. So that's what we're seeing driving. Brian, anything you would add to the kind of technical aspect of where we see the testing being driven?
I would say this is going to be my personal comment. I feel it needs to come out of the IT team. I've been a full stack developer my whole career. And one of the things I hated to do was to create tests. I hated writing unit tests. I wanted to spend more of my time solving problems. Jobin's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because 9 times out of 10, when I had to create my test cases, I didn't understand the business process that was associated to it. So I had to go back to the person. I had to schedule a meeting. I had to go and waste all of this time trying to figure out what I needed to do in an XYZ perspective. I see such a huge advantage of this shifting, Paula, out of the IT groups and more into the lines of business and the application SMEs, because they're the ones that know the applications. They're the ones that know the process. And so them being able to own that and then let IT focus on delivering new product capabilities within an organization, I think is going to make organizations just thrive.
Oh, it's definitely a streamlined approach, right? And again, I always go back, and this sounds so, I don't know, juvenile or just simplistic. But it's like, everybody stick to what you're good at, right? I'm not going to pretend to step in and start doing code for anything, let alone test it and tell you if it did something, right? I'll stick to what I'm good at, right? As should every organization, every industry, every business unit, right? And so I think that's true. And I think, kind of the catch up that needed to happen was, I don't think, the founders, the forefathers, the founding fathers of software development ever anticipated this much software, right? And this much, code, and this many languages, and this many interpretations of how it goes. And not just languages of code, but languages of, the international languages that we now have because we are low code, no code, right? And so my bot on my desktop is not going to work the same as my colleagues in India, right? So the way that we have to kind of diversify and expand the ability to have that, centralized just simply won't work, right? But I think there is some sort of a hybrid federated model that's beginning to emerge. And it
Definitely.
is similar to, I think, the really good operating model that we've come up with and we've kind of grown up in this RPA automation world, which is let the subject matter experts in the business tell us how the process is supposed to work, and then let the center of excellence combine their powers to put that together to make something happen, right? And I think the same is being true, and we're really seeing it across the board with testing in general. So the other thing, Jobin, I think, again, because piggybacking, I love the discussion with the business versus IT. That's like the age old, it's like marketing and sales, right?
Yep.
That's why I play on both sides, marketing and sales. But business and IT has always had that frictional point, but just because they simply just don't understand what the other, team's supposed to be responsible for. And again, that overarching governance of understanding the outcome. And I think that's becoming more transparent now that IT and business are having to work together to come up with what WonderBotz preaches about day in and day out, which is outcomes. Who cares how you get there? What is the end result supposed to be? Okay, you use your powers to figure out what that looks like technically. I'll use my powers to tell you what the people need to do and what the business processes need to do and the risk and governance needs to do. And we'll come up with a route that works for both, right? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing emerge. So some of the ways in which we cut cost, right, in this life cycle is not only in the development, and we showed it earlier with the different types of testing that there are, right? But I think it's important for everybody to know the true value, the actual, money on the table that's being left when testing isn't done, both in automation development and, migration and regression testing, all these different components. So Jobin, give us, and I want this from everybody actually. Jobin, we'll start with you. Give us an example of a place where, had testing not been used, there would have been a tremendous hiccup to the project timeline or a failure to launch, or, how Test Suite saved the day. Because I know you got a couple stories up your sleeve on that.
Yep, sure. So when it is coming to the timeline, we know that so there will be a lot of things sometimes we are doing unnecessarily. So let's go with an example. Regression testing. I think Brian or Mike pointed out regression types in the starting of this discussion, right? So we all know that what is regression testing, which is something we are checking the previous future, which is breakdown or not once we're done with the current one, right? So this is something we can automate. So which means that automated regression testing ensure the new updates doesn't break the functionality. This allowed the teams to deliver the future faster. Agree. So and along with that, there is something also happened that is yearly defect detection. That is something we all need, right? Before we are putting something into the production, we need to identify the defect. Same way, as I mentioned earlier, the improved test coverage, the comprehensive test coverage, which will be ensuring that the things are happening end to end. So these are the two things I would like to point out here when we are talking about the executing the project timelines.
Yep, that's spot on. So Mike and Brian, Mike, I'll start with you. Any examples there?
Yeah, really, we've got examples across every possible industry group. For a major bank, we automated regression testing for their mobile banking app. took their testing from 2 weeks down to 2 days. So now they do biweekly releases instead of quarterly. So new features, new bug fixes get in faster. For insurance, we cut their testing cycle from 3 weeks down to 4 days for a claim processing system. Allowed them to get regulatory changes in faster and improve software quality while they were doing it. But even the government,
they're probably not even getting the auditor dings at the end of the year like they traditionally would, right? So you're not only cutting cost of the software development, but there's ripple effects to that savings downstream, right? Especially if there's product launches. That's just fascinating. And being mindful of time, Brian, I'd love for you to share with that, but also add in, what are some of the ROI metrics that some of these folks should be thinking through? What should I be measuring against? What does good look like? You know, because Mike, from 2 weeks to 2 days, that sounds like what excellent looks like, right? So what are some levers that folks can kind of think through as they're planning their goals as it relates to improvement via testing?
Great question. I'll focus on the ROI stuff then. Let's switch gears a little bit. I think Jobin kind of nailed it, to be honest with you. I was really glad Mike had to go after him and not me. The thing that I'll say is that I'm going to highlight what Jobin talked about. 3 core things that you really want to identify. Okay, what's your regression? What do you want to put in place from an ROI perspective to make sure that the things that you have in place continue to work? Number 2, coverage. I couldn't agree with Jobin more. One of the things that we find a lot of times in manual-based organizations or orgs that are using open source things that are heavily coded and take a lot of time, you end up in a situation where you're not getting adequate coverage, or you're missing edge case scenarios that end up becoming catastrophic for your organization. And then the last one, I would think from an ROI metric perspective, is really, what do you want your time to value to be? If you start out with a new feature, how quickly do you want to get it to market? If you're in a situation where you're like, hey, we're only doing quarterly releases and you want to continue manual testing, go for it. But if you want that out in a 2-week sprint, you're probably going to want to gear yourself towards more automation. So obviously there's a million different ROI metrics that you could lean into, but if I were leading a QA team or an IT team, those would be the things that I would really want to focus on. What's going to be my regression pain points, or what's going to be my regression agenda? What do I want to do for test coverage? And then what's my speed to market that I want to achieve?
Right back to you real quick and just follow that up with saying, if somebody is not sure of what incremental value that they can get from Test Suite, what should be the considerations when budgeting for this? So how do you bring this to leadership or to procurement and say, I know we already asked you for 15 softwares and 2 AI pilots, but it's really important that you consider this, this testing as a service solution, because we need it for X, Y, and Z. What are the conversations, and how do you allocate or think through the explanation of budget for that? How would you coach somebody into that, Brian?
Me? I'm going to kick that to Mike. Paula, I rarely ever do budgetary conversations because I'm the tech guy.
Mike, absolutely, you can take that. I just thought it was so interesting what you said there of thinking through what the outcome is. So maybe, Mike, you can piggyback on that. How do they know what they're trying to achieve as an outcome to even be able to come up with what that realized value should be?
Absolutely. Every POC that Brian does has a business case attached to it. So we have to understand what the problem is and be able to estimate what the benefits would be. So we make that a central part of everything we do. But in the broader picture of ROI, we try to assess what the current state is, what's the current processes, tools, and how much is it costing them to do kind of a top-down analysis, and then talk about what the objectives are. Do we want faster releases? Do we want higher quality? Do we want to cut costs? A lot of times, especially the last 12 to 18 months, a lot of the work has been top-down cost takeout. Find areas where we can do better. Because what we really want to do is look at that total cost of ownership and be able to predict and project what that ROI would be for especially innovative ideas like testing as a service, where you're changing some things, shaking some things up, and simplifying it for the end customer.
And I'm going to boomerang right back, because I'm pretending as if it was me trying to figure out how to make a budget case for a leader, right? And if I'm thinking that through, one of the challenges we had in early RPA days, for example, is that the person that paid wasn't necessarily the beneficiary of the cost savings, right? And so while I had budget, Paula and QA Co, right? My beneficiaries were sitting over in finance reaping the benefits of this, of this money suck that I'm employing into the organization. So how is that, managed, organized? How would you think that through, and how would you coach teams on how to centralize that budget versus the allocation of the benefits that that budget allows them to realize?
Sorry, that was coming back to me?
That's back at you, yeah.
I would look at the overall picture, because there's a difference in handling a capital expense versus an operating expense, and the ability to actually test based on the number of tests being run by a group should scale with the benefits that they're seeing.
Okay, very cool. So
Paula, I will chime in. Paula, I'll chime in on this one, and I'll say this.
Yeah.
We've done this so many times, not only on our own, but with you, in that, we have really good models where we can go in, and once we get a lay of the land, we can come back and say, hey, by taking this out of a manual-based process, or even if you're using a coded solution, we can get you faster here. We can create more ease of use initiatives. We have organizations that in some cases are spending $1 million, and I'm like, hey, you could spend 100 or 200,000 automating this stuff and end up saving 800. So what I would tell a lot of organizations who are trying to identify what their ROI or their budget initiatives are, is that map out kind of what the lay of the land is today, identify what you're spending from a realistic perspective. Paula, you mentioned that. You said total cost of ownership. It's the maintenance of old legacy systems that you're taking care of. It's the cost that you're paying to IT resources to be able to go in and handle that kinds of stuff. And Jobin, you deal with this on a daily. I'll kick it to you because you obviously have some good perspective on this too.
Yep, I totally agree with you. So when we are talking about the ROE metrics, right? One thing, I'm not more into the business side, but I'm just one small thought. So the cost we are saving on the manual effort, that is something going to be the factor, right? So when it is comparing with the budget and all, obviously the effort which we are saving also will be considered, right?
Yeah, no, and I totally agree, guys. And I wasn't meant to challenge. I love that everybody kind of chimed in and had the answer. But Brian, that's the answer that I was looking for, is what do you spend on it today? Because guess what the answer is most likely going to be? I don't know. No, correct. I don't know. I have no idea how much I spend on testing. Well, then, honey, let me help you pull back the layers of all of your IT spend, right? And then really help you see that this is something that you've overlooked, right? And I think that's the crux of it, is that we're talking about something that perhaps is nebulous, to people, because they have no line of sight into the line item and or costly repairs and mistakes that gets tossed into development, that gets tossed into production, that gets tossed into failed project, right? And the codes that are associated with that on a review of budget, right, aren't going to spell out, had there been testing, right, the opportunity savings that could have prevailed in that instance. So thank you so much for that, guys, because I think that was a really well-rounded answer, and it's something that everybody kind of needs to think that through. So before we started, I shared with everybody that we had a few questions that came in from registration. And so we want to make sure to answer those, because even the registrants who weren't able to make the time today will get a copy of this afterwards. So we want to make sure that we answer all of their questions as well. So, and thank you, Brian, for answering in the Q&A chat too. We'll expose that one to everybody as well too. So how can we leverage addressing test data challenges for RPA bot testing? So how did the two correlate? And I think I'm going to send that to you, Brian. What do you think?
Yeah, that one's totally me for sure.
Challenge you? Okay.
So there's a couple of options there. One of the nice things about Test Suite on test data management is that you've got a plethora of options. One, anytime you're building a test case, we've got different activity packs that allow you to be able to do some of the following. You can build test data queues, which is basically predefined data sets that can be inbound inputs to your test executions. During runtime, you can consume Excel spreadsheets that can have different data variations within them to be able to execute multiple iterations of a test case with different data variations associated to them. You can generate randomized data. This is one of our AI, generative AI features within the platform, that you can go in at runtime, you can just have randomized data. You might go in and say, hey, at runtime during this test case, I want to use, I want 15 different test options with users from the Austin with a 7, 8 739 zip code and 512 area code for phones or whatever. You can access third-party systems and scrape data from those screens, assign them to variables as input parameters. You can go in and you can make API calls to generate JSON objects for inputs to test cases, making database calls. Again, there's a myriad of different options. And so what I would tell individuals is that when you start thinking about test data management, UiPath has a solution to help you get there. The key thing is letting us understand what it is you want to achieve. Paula, I love your whole comment about what's your outcome, and then we can give you the options on how you can get there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And as we get to these last final questions, I'm going to put all of the contact information for our panelists and experts here. I'm not an expert, I'm just on there because I was hosting it, but these guys are the ones you should reach out to. Their LinkedIns are available there on the QR code, so connect with them. They are more than eager to answer your questions offline if you didn't get to them today. And I know some people had to fall off as well in the chat. So the last question, and Jobin, I'll start with you, and then we'll just do a round robin and have everybody's input here. But somebody asked, they wanted to know a little bit more about AI in testing. So auto creation of test cases from manual cases. Is there applications of leveraging testing for the understanding and implementation of AI? So Jobin, I'll start with you, and then Brian, and then Mike, you can wrap us.
Got it.
Yes, I will pick this. So as I mentioned earlier, you can start the test cases from the scratch by leveraging the autopilot, or else think about a scenario that your test case is already created manually. Then as long as the steps are defined properly there, you can link it on your studio. From there, you can make use of the AI to make it as a coded automation. Or now I think UiPath is bringing new feature from coded automation back to the workflow also now possible. So you can leverage these things. So ideally, this is in a hybrid approach. Not fully we are leveraging the AI capabilities, but half of the thing manually, half of the thing AI, yes, which is possible.
Fabulous. Brian, to you.
Jobin, you nailed it. And I actually get to do an announcement here. At our Forward event in October of this year, we're actually rolling out that workflow low code, no code AI capability. So Jobin, to your point, today we have the ability to be able to take those requirements and create those manual test cases. And what I like to tell people is that right now, the platform, the way that it's in place, is that the AI feature will get you about 80% of the way there. You'll go in, you dot your I's, you cross your T's, but huge uplift in regards to productivity and output. My favorite part is then taking those manual test cases or those requirements and then creating automations from them. So it's generating machine code for coded test case automations. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, we're rolling out a generative AI feature for low code, no code workflows in October at our Forward event. We're super excited about that. And then the last component too that we have built into the platform today is we have an insights module. So it gives you the ability to run an AI insights overview of what you're doing with your testing today to be able to potentially identify areas that you're unaware of. It'll give you like failed test cases, the most failed test processes. It'll also give you areas of recommendation for reconciliation. So all kinds of cool things that are available. And those are just some of the features. Obviously, there's more that we'd be more than happy to show you in a live demo.
Mike, any last thoughts?
My last thoughts are virtually every one of our demos these days includes the generative AI component, and it is becoming a driving factor in getting people to move to the cloud. Even banks and financial institutions that have traditionally been laggards when it comes to moving to the cloud, they're all moving to look at this because it's going to really change things. You know, in addition to what Brian just outlined, we're adding new functionality. In fact, now we can take an SAP heat map that understands how your people are using SAP, and it can generate test cases based on the gaps. It can look at changes that are coming and generate test cases based on the gaps. So it is going to become a game changer across the board, but it's GA now for an awful lot. So we'd love to talk to you about it.
That's so powerful, Mike. Thank you so much. So you guys heard it here. You have to go to UiPath Forward. So WonderBotz is proud to be a sponsor once again this year. So we will be joining the guys there once on the main stage, and then throughout the course of the week, we've got several activities planned. But the launch of Test Suite in its new shiny wrapper will be revealed at UiPath Forward. So reach out to us for complimentary tickets. WonderBotz is happy to support your entrance there. And then if anybody wants a demo, Another takeaway that we'd love for you guys to have. So please reach out to bd@wonderbotz.com. We'll schedule a demo with Mike, Brian, and Jobin, whoever's time zone best matches what yours is, and then we'll get you guys up and rolling. So hopefully this was informative. Thanks again for everybody who attended, joined, for our speakers, UiPath, for the brilliant partnership that we've always had. Thank you so much for yet another successful Wonder webinar this month in August. Thanks so much, guys.